So it was a long chain of events. We're very happy that you're here. I think we'll have a great time. And I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime. I'll just tell you something about Marcus. I came to Marcus because he does all my marketing work. And I said, I want to plan a canning festival. He said, John, you're thinking too small. Now, that doesn't happen very often with me. Somebody tells me I'm thinking too small. So after that, we started working on this, and we're very happy you're here. Marcus.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. The reason I said John was thinking too small was because for quite a few years, I've had an event like this in my imagination. And sometimes our imagination is bigger than what we ever accomplish in life. This time, it wasn't. And yes, John thinks big, but and he also pushes people over the edge sometimes. So as much as I push him, he also pushes me, and we make a good time out of it. So my name is Marcus Wengard. I'm really pleased that all of you are here. Thank you for coming. I own the campground here, so the rule is there is no rule except be kind to one another, don't hurt each other, and don't get hurt. We have a lot of things going on today that could hurt someone. Make sure that you're alert and watch out for each other, and make sure you I don't want to say stay safe. I don't want to say that, but somehow I want to say stay safe. I think we have plenty of restrooms here. There's portable toilets up here, some down here. There's a shower house around the corner, portable restrooms over on the other side of the tents. And behind us here in the food tent, the men and women have been preparing a wedding feast for us, so you can look forward to that for lunch. They started early this morning. They were here before I was, so they started nice and early this morning to prepare a good lunch for us. So thanks again for coming. John and I go back quite a number of years, and one thing to know about John is that if you don't want him to do something, you tell him it's easy to do. If you want him to do something, you tell him it's hard. So with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, I'm here to tell you how we put a lid on it. And we have one technical problem, so I'm going to be doing hand signals to advance the slides. So I'd like to advance to slide one. So Superb Industries is the next town over in Sugar Creek, Ohio. We've been in business for about 35 years. We do 1.5 billion parts a year. And this is the first time we've put our name on a product. We do a lot of work for automotive, a lot of work for electronics. We do the things that make your products work that you don't know about it. We're hidden under we're hidden inside the automobile and the hair dryers and other things that you use. But this is different. So next slide. One of the things that happens when there is a need, how many of you had trouble finding canning lids about 2 years ago? So there was a big need, and I'll tell you a little bit about how this all happened and how we put a lid on it. But if necessity is the mother of invention, it takes a community to fill the need. And in this community, we are famous for building barns in a day. The barn that you see up there is actually just a few miles from here, And if my recollection is correct, from the time the barn burned down until the day that you see in the picture was 12 working days. They cleaned it up, they built the barn, the community came together and filled the need. So there was a need for canning lids. In fact, there's a big need for canning lids still and better lids. I'm here to tell you why our lid is better. I'm not bashful, right? And we've got people in the audience that helped me do it. And I'll also tell you something about myself. You ever seen a turtle on a fence post? You've read about it, okay? When you see a turtle on a fence post, you know two things. He didn't get up there by himself, and he probably shouldn't be there. That's me. I've had the good fortune of working with people and having people work for me that know more than I do, that are better than I am. So I'm just the guy that goes out there and makes the promises. At Superb, we have a saying, I make the promises, you keep them. That's called teamwork. So let me tell you how this all started. Next slide. Here's how it all began. Advance it one more. So I got a call from, just go all the way through to this slide. So I got a call from two of my friends in 1 week. One was Mark Koblenz. He'll be speaking a little bit later this morning. The other one is Galen Lehman. And this was around about Thanksgiving time in 2020. And they said, John, can you help us? Help what? Can you make canning lids? So the first thing we did is counted the cost. We took about a month and looked at it, and we asked the question, can we compete with the bellwether of lids? And everybody knows that name. Can we compete with China? Can a small company build a sustainable business from a commodity product? And then it occurred to me that's really what we've been doing for 3 decades. We shipped more parts to Mexico and China than the United States for several years. And the reason we can do that is we're partnered up with a German company called Bieler, and we automate it to the point where labor plays a very small role for that. The canning lid process, or the process required to make canning lids, fits that technology really well. So next slide. We said, yes, we can as a community. Because I know how to make stuff. I don't know how to distribute stuff. Walnut Creek Foods is in 30 states. Lehman sells all over the world. So they had the distribution, and we went to work. Next slide. So the process was simple. Well, kind of simple. The concept was simple. The process was difficult. So we decided to benchmark the best. So I went around the community throwing $20 bills at any woman that would give me the last few lids they had, right? We took it back to our lab. We cut them apart. We measured them. We looked at everything and reverse engineered and used that as a benchmark. We said, we want to be as good as or better. As good as or better. We found suppliers. We have a gentleman sitting in the front row here. Kyle, I'm going to call you out. I said I might do that. I called this company and said, we want the plastisol to make sure that the lid's sealed. He said, well, can't tell you. It's a secret what the other people use. I said, that's okay. That's just fine. Just give me a recipe that's better. Just make it better. So that was the next concept. Benchmark the best and then make it better. I'm not going to bother you with all the details. It's all up there, but let me just show you what differentiates. And you'll notice when you look at our lid, the geometric shape is different. There's a patent pending because we found out that by making the shape different, it would be stronger. It would last longer. So that's the first distinction. The pop indicator, you know how it goes pop, 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 or should we say ding, ding, ding? Have you ever heard that ding? Isn't that just kind of a nice feeling? You know it's sealed, or you think it is, okay? So most of the lids on the market are calibrated, or better stated, not calibrated at all, somewhere between a half a pound and a pound and a half of vacuum. We went a little bit better, 2 pounds. So it takes a little bit longer to pop because it takes a little bit longer to build the vacuum. Coating. Have you ever opened a lid and it has some corrosion on the back? So we added 24% more BPA-free coating. The chemistry of the seal, this is important when you're pressure canning, and when you pressure can your meat, it takes a long time. You're pressure canning at 15 psi. When you're pressure canning at 15 psi, the temperature inside that canner is 249 degrees. We have something called the screwdriver test. Sometime you should do a comparison. Take 2 lids, take mine, take whatever other brand you want, put it in an oven, and bake it for half an hour at 250 degrees. Well, 249, but 250 works as well. And after you've baked it for a half an hour, take it out on your hot pad, take a screwdriver or a butter knife, and see what happens. And what you'll find out is you can just scrape off the seal, which means when you're pressure canning, you literally have the seal material in suspension. I'm getting too technical. You with me? All right. Size of the seal. What I learned about when I was off. Back on? There we go. Okay. I'm used to working with automotive tolerances where we literally split hairs. Chars aren't that way. Chars on the top aren't flat. You may have never noticed that. We checked them in our lab. They're actually, because the glass shrinks. So what we did is we put more seal material on there to be able to compensate for that. We also made it softer so that if you have imperfections on top of your char and you tighten it up, it will seal anyway. But here's what you can't do. If you make it too tight, it can't vent. So use the 3-finger method. And then we went to work. It just happened that we had 2 German-built machines sitting in our plant for a project that had been canceled that were suited to make this product. So we went from the word go to shipping our first 1,000,000 parts in 5 months. That was August of last year. Normally, a program like that would take about 18 months, and we're still making improvements. We also validated and are now going from coil to finished product in all one process. So I don't care what China does because we can compete. We have a guy named Rob Scott who has a very important job. Every day he cans between 100 and 200 pints from every batch that we make to just ensure that everything is working, okay? So we have, and I'll get to this later, but we have made and shipped to date 30 million lids in the last year. We get about 2 to 3, on a bad week, 6 calls a week from people having problems. And typically it is too tight. So if you don't remember anything else I said, don't make it too tight. 3-finger method. I tried it out on my aunts last week. They all came in to watch the canning lids being made. and they were taught by my grandma. They were all taught the same way. I said, how tight do you make it? Everybody says tight, but not too tight, right? So I said, let's test this. We have a machine in our lab. We can check the torque. It's like a torque wrench, except it's for jars. So, test. We're still on. Okay, nobody got hurt. So I had my aunts do the test, and I kept score. And they ranged from 7 to 40 inch-pounds. That's how accurate tight but not too tight is in the same family. Right? It was funny. Next slide. So we now have one manufacturing line for regular. We have one manufacturing line for wide mouth. We have the capacity to produce 100 million lids right down the road in Sugar Creek, Ohio. Roll the tape. It's 500 a minute. Guys, go home and can a lot. Buy some more canning lids. So they're all prepped at the factory. So we have free, no obligation, no pre-registration necessary tours of the plant. It's at 100 Innovation Plaza in Sugar Creek, Ohio. There's signage out, so just if you have some time this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon, you go over there. The good folks at Superb will show you around, and you'll be able to see the equipment to make the canning lids. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, 30 million lids. I just had my wife Susan do all the stats. It was 29,700,000 and some thousand, so I rounded it up to 30 million. And we can make 2 million lids a week. So we have our work cut out to get distribution, get it all over the world. We've shipped to Australia. We've shipped to Canada and the United States. Next slide. So here are the featured distributors. If you want to know where to get it, Walnut Creek Foods, they're here. They have a booth. Lehman's, everybody knows Lehman's. They have a booth as well. And then we've got Berlin Seeds. They are the co-sponsor of this event. Marcus owns. It's great to have a friend that owns a printing company, a campground, and a seed company. You know, how do you figure that out? Fillmore Containers, they're here as well. They're over in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They're actually the folks that ship to Australia. And then we just signed Asher Standard. They have 3,000 drops. Some of you may know Asher. So they just went live yesterday, so you can order from them. You know, go home, order tonight, please. You know, I'm really bashful. Next thing. And that's how we put a lid on it. And as you can tell, we did it as a community. Next slide. So we advertised that we were going to teach you some things. I'd like to teach you the Superb canning mantra. I just made this up last night. Part of it I made up last night. So the next slide. So the Superb canning mantra is, I can, can't I? Yes, I can. So repeat after me. I can, can't I? Yes, I can. I can. Oh, look at that. Should we sing it? Do you want me to sing it? You want me to sing it? Oh, wow. Well, I'm not going to. Because one thing I do know, and I will confess, I got lassoed into doing music at church. And I believe you can make a joyful noise. So I'm going to be singing in church sometime before the end of the year, and that'll be the first and the last one. But I do have a treat for you this morning. Next slide. So we actually have a song entitled I Can. And it's not me singing, it's Ellie Freitag and the I Can Kids. It's composed by Mark Graham and was produced by Ken McCaw. Take it away, Ben. Maybe I do have to sing. Maybe it's a sign. Well, while they figure that out, I can. Can't I? Yes, I can. Come on. Come on, you can do better than that. You'll never forget this, will you? Okay, Ben, are we ready? And we're all homesteaders, right? So.
Oh, I can, can't I? Yes, I can. I can, can't I? Yes, I can. Superb lids really seal, and that blue ring makes me feel like I can. Yes, I can. I can. Canning used to be a ball, then it wasn't fun at all. But we're back on the track once again. And now there's nothing that can top when I hear those lids go. I can, yes I can, I can. Oh, I can, can't I? Yes I can. I can, can't I? Yes I can. Super lids really seal, and that blue ring makes me feel like I can. Yes I can, I can. Is there any better feeling than to hear a jar lid sealing over food that you grew yourself? I'm so glad we've left behind days when lids were hard to find, 'cause now Superb turns them out by the shelf. Oh, I can, can't I? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. I can, can't I? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Superb lids really seal, and that blue ring makes me feel like I can. Yes, I can. Oh, I know I really can. I can. Yes, I can. I can.
What do you think? I'll tell you a little secret, you'll never be able to get it out of your head. A lot of people that are a lot more talented than I am put that together for us, so you'll hear it probably a few more times. Okay, so now you didn't come to hear me. You came to hear the grandfather of homesteading, Mr. Joel Salatin. So I've got him backstage, and I'm not going to take any more time. Please give a warm Ohio welcome to Mr. Joel Salatin.
I'll get this pulpit out here so we can have our sermon. Preach it. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, it's great to be here. It's great to see such a wonderful crowd. When John called me about this, I didn't know if he could pull it off this fast. Most of these kinds of things take 9-10 months to kind of percolate. And I'm writing down here my time when I'm supposed to finish, so I don't overstay my welcome. So anyway, it's just a delight to be here, and really honored to work with this crew. When I got off the phone the first time with John, I told my wife, I don't know this guy, but after spending half an hour on the phone with him, visioning and thinking about what we would do, I'm not that smart, but I seem to have a talent for being able to tie my wagon to horses that are going places. And I think that's the key in life, isn't it? You don't have to do it. You just need to find the horses that are going places and tie your wagon to them. And I said, this guy's going places. So it's really fun to work with a group that's going places, and it's just wonderful. So what they wanted me to talk about this morning was, folks, This Ain't Normal. It's the title of one of my books. And by the way, all my books are over in the, I'll be glad to, I'm kind of hanging out over there in that vendor tent with all my books. So if you want to see how many words a guy can put down in a short life, why, you can go over there and see how many words there are. There are no repeats in the books, so you have to get them all. I don't even reuse the word "thee." It's just it's great. The theme of this is wonderful. Our family's a big canning family. I mean, I'm using we. You and me. Teresa, my wife, is the canner, and she cans, I don't know, 800 quarts of stuff. When she sends me to go get things for dinner, it's to the basement, and she gives me my list. Bring up 2 tomato juice, 3 green beans, 1 applesauce. And that's where we go shopping, and we've done that all our lives, and it's just great to be surrounded by people who thematically appreciate that and honor that in today's world, because today's world is crazy. And a lot of things that are going on today are not historically normal. And we have short memories. It's so hard. I mean, one of our apprentices yelled down from the living room recently. He said, what are these big CDs up here? Vinyl records, Pretty soon you won't even know what a CD is, because it's all live stream. But I'm constantly amazed at how short memories are. It's hard to believe, for example, in our culture right now, that the United States of America has existed longer without an IRS than with an IRS. Now, we're approaching the midpoint. It won't be long, but think about that. You mean we lived without an IRS? We lived without building inspectors? We lived without zoning boards? It's amazing. And so we live in strange times. And as I speak on college campuses, I'm struck by how short our memory is, and how quickly we assume that what we see is normal. We think that, iPhones are normal. I haven't gotten one yet, so I'm still on the flip phone. You can't text me, and I don't know how to get the messages off, so the message board's always full. Nobody can ever, leave a message. It's there if I want to call somebody, it's for my convenience, not yours. So, but we are completely tied up, aren't we, with screen time today, and the thought of living. I mean, I'm thinking. I watch our team on the farm, and they've got their little, Motorola, call things. They can, I'm up moving the pigs. I need another, another gate handle. What, calling back and forth. What did we do before all that stuff? Somehow we made plans and schedules, and we survived, and it was all okay. So I've got several kind of cultural things that I want to go through this morning, because my thesis here on this is, if I'm betting, now nobody here bets on horse races, I'm sure, but if I were betting on a horse race and there were two horses running, one that had never run a race before and one that had won its last 5 races, which horse would I bet on? The one that won 5 races, right? And so what I'm suggesting is that as we depart historical normalcy, as a culture, as a society, as a world, we are becoming more and more risky in what's going to happen because we've departed from normal. For example, number one, children don't have chores anymore. Think about, I mean, I don't know about you, kids used to have to fill the wood box. We had to help plant garden. We weeded the green beans. We worked in the kitchen, I remember as a kid sitting, it was corn time, and everybody got their little knife and we sat on the floor with newspapers, listened to Paul Harvey on the radio, and now Paul Harvey's gone, the radio's gone, and and people aren't doing that sort of thing now. Butchery. It's time to butcher the chickens. It's time to, butcher a hog, whatever, for Thanksgiving. Some of my, fondest memories are the family hog killing. And everybody get together at Thanksgiving and we'd butcher these hogs. Now it's just video games and screen time, and we're even hearing a lot of, child behavioral psychologists and all sorts of issues in the culture. Teenage suicide is through the roof. Why? Because somehow the affirmation of you as an important individual is not as good if you're simply the top points getter on Angry Birds than if you come down in the morning after a good night's sleep, after a previous day's hard work, and see 48, 7 in a can, or it's not 48, it'd be 49 quart jars of fresh squeezed tomato juice canned on the counter. And you check all the lids, you go along, pop, you see, oh, one didn't can. Okay, well, we'll eat that one, we'll make a casserole and eat that. There's a lot of affirmation in tactile, visceral participation in our ecological umbilical and the foundations of life. So what happens is, as a culture moves away from this, and everything is surrounded by virtual reality, screen time, and, oh, nobody liked me in the last 30 minutes. Oh no, the world has forgotten about me because nobody liked me in 30 minutes. And so we've got this tremendous jaundicing. And what happens is that when you don't participate like this, you get a really hubris view. Oh, I've got the world at my fingertips. When you play a video game, I've never played one, so this is just what I'm told. It gives you, now I know people that do, so I'm not completely out of the loop, all right? But think about it. You're driving a car, right? You're in some sort of thing, and you go around too fast around a corner, and your car, and your little icon driver, flips out and dies, whatever, and you wait about 5 seconds, and the game gives you a new car and a new avatar. See, I know some of this stuff. And you're back in a driver's seat, and you're, right? Life isn't like that. You hit 16, 17 years old, flip your car, run through a telephone pole, and crash. You don't just wait 5 seconds, and life gives you a new car and a new body. Are you with me? And so there's something about participating in chores and gathering eggs and growing tomatoes and canning food and the kinds of children's chores that we had that give us a sense of something bigger than us. I don't control this with a little gizmo at my fingertips. Bugs come, fungus comes, weeds grow, animals get sick and die. Food doesn't just magically appear because I click the cashier's button at Kroger's. And so I think children's chores foundationally, chores that are participatory in these foundations of life bring us to adulthood with a sense of seasonality, cyclicality, responsibility, authenticity, accountability, all these fabulous words that many of us, don't we feel like, are being lost in our culture today. You know, you can't just do anything you want to do. Life is not always going to give you a new avatar and a new game. Another thing that's not normal today is this whole debate about a cat is a cow, is a chicken, is my aunt. This animals are humans, and I'm getting more and more, out there in the world. You know, I'm a murderer. How many murders have you committed this year? Actually, about 20,000, but. So I recently debated on a international social media site. I debated Peter Singer. Some of you may know the name. He's kind of the founder of the animal welfare, animal rights movement, and we debated on this program. And the topic, the resolution was, animals don't belong on our plates. Well, I like my animals. Yeah, I like my, animals not to be just on the plate. I like pieces of them and parts of them. But think about this. Historically, we didn't have the luxury of having this debate. I mean, our forebears, if you could catch it, trap it, shoot it, or raise it, you survived to live another day. We didn't have time to sit around and have focus groups and all come to some sort of harmonic convergence about, whether or not animals were people. The fact is that everything is eating and being eaten. And if you don't believe it, go lie naked out here in one of these wood chip pits and see what gets eaten in a week. The magnificent cycle of life is life, death, decomposition, regeneration, life, death, decomposition, regeneration. The beautiful example of that is a compost pile. You put this stuff in there, and it was living, and then it dies, and then a bunch of microbes decompose, eat it all up, and release new minerals and enzymes and vitamins that then grow another tomato plant or another pepper or grow a crop of hay. The point is that this is the cycle of life, and in order to live, something must die. In order to live, something must die. That has profound implications for life. In fact, it has a profound implication for eternal life, right? And so this notion, it's a similar notion to chemical fertilizer. That nothing has to live to grow that corn. Nothing has to live to grow that crop of hay. It can all just be mechanical. And so as we have taken the sacredness out of life as a culture, we have mechanized everything. Well, we can just take some DNA here, DNA there. Now our cow colleges are trying to figure out the porcine stress gene so we can continue to disrespect pigs more mightily in factory confinement houses, but at least the pigs won't be stressed about it. And I would suggest that a culture that views its life from that perspective will start viewing its citizens the same way. If we're going to have a culture that respects and honors the merriness of Mary and the Tomness of Tom, it starts with respecting the pigness of the pigs. And so this thing, the animals are human is a real abnormal thing. And in some ways, I admit, I have this little, whatever, sinful nature, this demon inside of me that sometimes would like to see hardship and starvation in our culture, and let's see how suddenly people don't want to eat an egg or cheese or a cow. Let them eat some rats and some skunks, and maybe they'll enjoy some pork and some chicken for a change. The next one, another abnormal part of our culture today, is that we have developed sterile food. Now, the reason that a canning jar, I'm enjoying kind of embellishing this with a lot of canning stuff today, more than I normally would. It pulls a vacuum. Why is the vacuum necessary for the canning jar? Because if air gets in it, it's going to decompose. How many things are people buying today in the grocery store that don't decompose even when the air gets on them? Squeezable cheese. You can take Velveeta and squeeze it out on your table, and you can walk away from it for a year and come back, it's still sitting on the table. But you take real cheese, put it on the table, and in 3 days at ambient temperature, it's going to get all fuzzy, and within a week, it's going to sprout legs and walk off the table. If things won't decompose, they won't digest. And we are now spending all of our effort in everything from ultra-pasteurized milk. Listen, shelf-stable milk for 6 months? That ain't right. It certainly isn't normal. We're the first society, we're the first time in human history suddenly, we're eating things that you can't make in your kitchen. Have you ever tried to make monosodium glutamate? How about high fructose corn syrup? You can't make this stuff in your kitchen. I'm kind of a believer with Michael Pollan when he wrote that probably we shouldn't eat anything that wasn't available before 1900. 1900 is kind of the cutoff date, kind of the flip over to where we started all this highfalutin, sterile and food and industrialism. And we can all be really thankful that hot dogs were introduced at the 1890 World's Fair. I mean, it just slipped right in there under the wire. And we've got this mentality now, and especially in the food police, the Food Safety Inspection Service, the FDA, I call it the USDA, FDA, all these does up there in D.C. But we got this idea that safe food is sterile food. I mean, it's perfectly safe to drink 5 Coca-Colas a day because that's sterile, but raw milk, that'll kill you. That anything that's biologically active is unsafe. And every year I go down, Teresa sends me down to the basement to look at some of the jars, and you can tell the stuff that got air to it. If a seal broke, my goodness, there's mold in there, and suddenly the next thing you know, the cat starts to walk, and then you got creatures from the Black Lagoon walking out on your shelf. What does our microbiome need to thrive? That's a kind of new term we've just started bandying about here. If you're as old as I am, we didn't grow up with the term microbiome. What we didn't grow up with also is the term food allergy. We didn't hear that when we were kids. When we were kids, people didn't have to, moms that were having a birthday party for a 4-year-old didn't have to call all the other moms and say, what are your kids allergic to? But when you disabuse and disrespect food as mightily as our culture has, when you disrespect life as mightily as our culture has, life starts to kick back. As they say, nature bats last. And you don't disrespect the Creator's design forever without pushback. And so this whole new lexicon of Campylobacter, E. coli, Salmonella, food allergies, gluten intolerance. What this is this abused, this mechanical view of life, this who cares about how happy pigs are, let's just make them fatter, let's grow them fatter, faster, bigger, cheaper. That kind of mentality disrespects life and then creates a lexicon that's essentially all these Latin squiggly words, Campylobacter, E. coli, Listeria. We didn't say those when I was a kid, but what this is nature on its back begging us, enough. Who listens? Wall Street certainly doesn't. So what your microbiome needs to thrive is living stuff. Diversity. And if you know me, you know that whenever I can, I go by the cow trough out in the field where the cows are drinking, and I drink out of the cow trough with the cows. Feeds my microbiome. You can just see this microbes just percolating out of my ears. All right. Number four on the abnormalities of today is concentrated food systems. Historically, you couldn't assemble that much stuff in one place because with mules and horses and oxen, with draft power, you simply can't move that much material from one place to another. But once we got cheap energy with petroleum, we were suddenly able to cart in a lot more. In 1910, all the metropolitan newspapers, the editorials were predicting the demise of the city, because you couldn't haul enough fodder in and haul enough poop out to keep the city running. So they thought the cities were going to implode. Everywhere you walked, there was poop. There was horse poop everywhere, oxen poop. Dairies, before refrigeration, dairies were in the cities, and they were located next to the distilleries. The two things that people drank that needed refrigeration before refrigeration. So we had swill dairies, and we had all sorts of milk problems and things because they were eating distillers' grains. My point is that you simply could not concentrate the food production in a single place like we can today, because you simply couldn't move enough feed in and enough poop out. Okay? But we can do that today. And of course, then antibiotics came in. That stimulated the concentration as well. And we overran nature's capacity to metabolize things. So we've made pathogen-friendly farms. If somebody here, we made a committee. Let's say at the end of this 2 days, we're going to get a committee of 4 people, and we're going to create the most pathogen-friendly. We have a diabolical theme, like we're the bad guy on a 007, and so we got this diabolical thing to encourage pathogens on farms. And so we get together, the 4 of us to get together. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to make sure that a farm only produces one thing. We don't want confused pathogens. So we're going to be a dairy, or we're going to be an apple orchard, or we're going to be a hog factory, whatever. We're going to just produce one thing. As much monoculture as possible. We're going to have, monocultures and monospeciated farms. And then we're going to confine these animals in buildings. We don't want them to have sunshine. Sunshine's sterile. That's hygienic. So we don't want them to have sun. And we don't want them to have fresh air. So we're going to confine them in there so they get to breathe fecal particulate all day. And this fecal particulate comes in their tender respiratory membranes like sandpaper, and makes abrasions so they can bleed internally, and then all the diseases can go right into their bloodstream. And as we know in chickens, it can actually go into the oviduct. So you get salmonella in eggs, that are supposed to have, you get where I'm going. What have I just described? I've just described modern industrial agriculture. Cheap energy made those distances unnecessary. In 1946, the average morsel of food traveled 40 miles from farm to plate. In 1946, the average morsel of food, 40 miles. Today, it's 1,500 miles. In 1900, it took 1 calorie of energy to put 1 calorie of food on the plate. Today, it takes 15 calories to put 1 calorie on the plate. We have replaced resiliency with fragility and called it efficiency. And what we're seeing now is those chickens are starting to come home to roost. Number 5, cheap grain. Grain has always been expensive. If you read Thomas Jefferson's farm books, one of my favorites, you start seeing how expensive grain was back in the day because grain was expensive. It was expensive to plant. I mean, you know, if you're going to walk all day, you know, with a stick behind a water buffalo or a pair of horses, you know, it takes a long time to plow an acre with a stick. Okay? But if you got a 15 bottom plow on a 250 horsepower John Deere 4-wheel drive 8-tire articulated machine, you can tear up a lot of stuff in a hurry. It was expensive to till. It was expensive to plant. You know, if you're going to go out here and you're sowing seed, how much can you cover in a day? But if you got a 50-foot planter, you can cover. It was expensive to harvest. I mean, if you're going to go out and harvest with a scythe, and you're going to put it in a shock, how much can you cover in a day? You know, quarter acre. And there wasn't any fat people back then. Everybody was lean and mean. And then you put it in a shock. And you wait on it for a few days to dry out. And then you take those shocks and you put them through the thrashing. How are we going to thrash? Well, we're going to find a nice solid floor, maybe put some boards down, planking, and we're going to beat it. We're going to thrash it, and then we're going to throw it up in the air and let a breeze, blow the chaff away. And at the end of the day, after all of this process, we've got some precious little morsels of grain. In fact, in antiquity, most of the military might of nations was to protect the great big 12-foot tall urns, clay urns of grain storage. But now, we can have cheap grain. And that has completely changed the way we eat, the way we feed our animals. You know, in the biblical parable of the prodigal son, when the dad said, "Go kill the fatted calf," that was not a grain-fed calf. That was a stalled calf that was brought cut and carry. When the Crusaders went down through France and Normandy, heading to the Middle East during the Crusades in the 11 and 1200s, or 11 and 12,000s, they talked about all the cut and carry. So the idea was that you would scythe down, so you had a stall, because in a nomadic structure, the animals are walking a lot all day, hard to get them fat. And so if they wanted a fattened one, they'd put it in a stall or a little corral, and they would scythe down tender grasses nearby, bring them in a cart in, and they'd haul the manure out. And so around the kind of home hub there would be this very, very highly fertile, succulent, growing some annuals and some really sweet forages for the animals. They weren't grain fed. Omnivores were salvage operations. Poultry and pigs were always up around a garden, a homestead. So they would eat the farm scraps, the whey, the cheese, all that stuff. I mean, all this cheese in this county all generates a lot of whey. That whey should all go into adjacent piggeries growing pigs. That's the way historically the food system works, but with cheap grain now, we've been able to segregate the components of the foods of the production system. We've segregated them rather than the complex integration that our forebears had. These integrated systems are now highly segregated. That only seems efficient as long as petroleum is cheap. But as soon as petroleum gets expensive, that won't seem good anymore. Okay? So historically, normal systems were highly integrated, very complex relationally. Number 6, cheap food. Historically, food has always been expensive. A major component of either our activity or our labor or our wealth or all of those. Just as recently as 40 years ago, American per capita expenditure on food averaged 18% of their income. Today, less than 9%. Interestingly, in the last 40 years, the average per capita expenditure on health care was 9% 40 years ago, and today it's 18. So the 9 and 18 have inverted in the last 40 years. Health care to food. I wonder if there's any relationship. Food culture has always been about taste, texture, the dining experience until modern America. Now it's all about speed and price. Prince Charles, who's now King Charles III, he's quite a sustainable ag advocate and a friend. I've been with him several times. And he says that a culture is defined by its architecture, religion, and food culture. Architecture, religion, and food culture. I've been all over the world, and every time I go to visit a new country, hostess, whoever's, I say, when I say American food, what has the American culture contributed to the global food understanding, options? I have never in any country of the world had anybody say anything other than McDonald's. It's the standard answer, McDonald's. Now you go to any other country in the world, you got, tacos in Mexico. You got, shepherd's pie in, Denmark. There's all sorts of stuff. But America is known for McDonald's. In fact, we're so invested in fast food that today people spend more for good food for their pets than good food for their children. And we have this thing, you get what you pay for, that's like an axiom, where you get what you pay for in shoes, clothes, automobiles. I don't know, but I'm assuming you get what you pay for in horses and horse and buggies and other all sorts of things, right? We say you get what you pay for. There's only one thing that's supposed to be an exception: food. There, you don't have to get what you pay for. You buy cheap stuff and expect doctor and drugs to fix you what's ever wrong with you. And this cheap food policy has created a fundamental societal disrespect for farmers as first responders to our natural resources. When's the last time that a customer at the farmer's market said, "Man, I hope there's someday you can drive in here in a Mercedes-Benz"? This whole idea of cheap, disrespected food creates this societal idea that farmers are the dumb ones. If you're a D student, you can go be a farmer. But if you're an A and B student, man, you want to go make something of your life. I still have an emotional twitch from the last time I went to the guidance counselor in high school, as an upcoming senior, and she's looking at my curriculum. And I said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a farmer." She about went into an apoplectic seizure. What? Waste all that talent? Yeah, waste all that talent. And that happens. When's the last time you heard a bunch of soccer moms get around and talk about their little child prodigies? well, my little Mary, you know, she's 8. She's already playing Bach's Opus 58, you know, on the piano, like a, you know. And another mom says, well, my little Amy, you know, she wants to be a farmer. And all the other moms go, wow, cool, I wish mine would want to do that. The day we have soccer moms wanting their children to be farmers is the day we will start seeing food honored and respected in this country. I would suggest that what we need are our best and brightest caretaking our ecological womb, not the flunkies. Number 7, food ignorance. You know, people used to viscerally participate in food culture, gardens, canning, butchering, you know, creating a larder. If I came in here, I said, where's all the food in Walnut Creek, Sugar Creek, where's all the food? You know, before, and I realize this is a very different kind of place than most places in the country. But you go in the average city, where's all the food? The food today is in, you know, Costco warehouse, Walmart, in an Amazon Prime, you know, warehouse. 100 years ago, where was the food? The food was in the home larder. It was a fundamental home-centric. It was in the pantry. And so this food ignorance moves to lots of areas. I mean, the idea that there's seasonality. I mean, the fact that our newspaper carried a big AP wire story yesterday on the front page that the local supermarkets couldn't get strawberries for 2 weeks. We're all going to die. There's going to be a shortage of strawberries in January. Yeah, there's always a shortage of strawberries at our house in January. We eat them like pigs for, you know, 2 months and enjoy them and embrace the seasonal provision and abundance that's there. But seasonality, blemishes. Oh, I can't have an apple with a blemish on it. Eating salvage, eating nose to tail is part of life. You know, our ancestors couldn't afford to just eat boneless, skinless breast. When we started doing chickens 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you know, I'll be very sexist for a moment. You know, all women were born with a cut-up chicken gene in their DNA. You know, they learn from their mothers, and they, you know, and they all learn how to cut up a chicken. And we've watched this steady, I don't call it a progression, I call it a regression over the decades, to where now half of our customers don't know that a chicken has bones. I mean, you know, they think they would just kind of go out and pick boneless, skinless breast off a tree somewhere. Yeah. It's like the kid that got off the school bus the other day, this farm tour. He gets off the bus and says, take me to the salsa tree. I want to find the salsa tree. We're going to go pick salsa. Then in the 1970s, we got the dietary guidelines. Our government, for the first time, decided to tell us what to eat. And if you remember that dietary guidelines, that food pyramid, it put crackers and Cheerios on the bottom, on the foundation. And then they wonder why 40 years later we got a diabetes epidemic and a obesity problem. You know, we would be a much healthier culture if the government had never told us what to eat. They told us to eat margarine for 30 years. Now they don't want us to eat any. I don't understand why the people believe the government for anything. And it just continues. And so today, this food ignorance has moved into this convenience category where, you know, we have kitchen nooks now. In new houses, a lot of new houses, they hardly have a kitchen. Or in old houses, remodel houses, you know, it's a sign of affluence when you remodel your kitchen. We've never put more techno-glitzy gadgets in our kitchen and been more ignorant about how to use them. or where they are. And so we graze with single serving packages. And I go and eat at 3, and my brother eats at 4, and Dad eats at 6, and Mom eats at 7, and we just kind of graze. I mean, we do have these apprentices and stewards that come to the farm, and we've got to teach table etiquette because they've never passed food around a table. It's unbelievable. This is not evolving into some new Star Trek levitational existence. It is a de-evolution into barbarism. We're becoming uncivilized. To me, the ultimate test of food understanding in your household, do you eat leftovers? Because leftovers indicate you probably cooked a bigger pot, you ate together, you had some left over, and you're eating it. That's the ultimate test. Number 8, disrespecting history's bounty. I think it's important to realize that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than we produce today in North America. Now, it wasn't all eaten by people. There were a couple million bison. There were, a couple 100 million bison. There were 2 million wolves, all of whom needed 20 pounds of meat a day. That's a lot. That's a lot of eating. We had 200 million beavers that ate more vegetables. They're herbivores, beavers are. They ate more vegetation than all the people in North America today. Now, it wasn't carrots and potatoes, but it was the same type of stuff. It was vegetation. We had flocks of passenger pigeons. John Audubon sat under a tree in about 1820. He recorded in his diary that I couldn't see the sun for 3 days because the passenger pigeon flock flying over blocked out the sun for 3 days. And we don't even have that many starlings and sparrows. And this was all before Tyson and before, Purdue and everybody else. John Deere, hybrid seed corn. We produced way more food 500 years ago than we do today. The prairie choreography of animal movement, what I call mob stalking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. You think I can't do that again, don't you? I'll turn the page over. Mob stalking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. If you practice in front of a mirror, you can start doing that. But this idea that nature is scarce and nature is not abundant, like nature is some sort of a reluctant partner that we have to, I'm going to get you in a half nut and I'm going to make you grow this milk or this, apple or whatever, Actually, God gave us a nature that is not a reluctant partner, but a benevolent lover that just wants to be caressed in the right places. So people ask me, I do a lot of, press stuff and things, but what gets you up in the morning? What's your most exciting thing? And I tell you, you know what? It's the privilege and honor of awakening each morning knowing I can participate in healing. Have our ancestors, and maybe some of us, done a lot of destruction? Yeah. But the answer is not to abandon the environment, walk away from it. No, the answer is to take this mechanical ability, opposing thumbs. Monkeys don't have opposing thumbs. Mechanical ability and intellectual capacity. Yes, after we've repented in sackcloth and ashes for a dead zone the size of the Rhode Island and the Gulf of Mexico, infertile frogs, three-legged salamanders, losing a bushel of soil for every bushel of corn we produce, and all the negatives we've done, yes, let's repent in sackcloth and ashes on that, but then let's pick us up and let's take our talents and our abilities that have been hurtful and use them for healing. Let's take off the conquistador hat. Let's take off the rapist's hat, the exploiter's hat. and let's become nurturers. We can do that, and we can participate in it. And one of the great things of gardening and canning and seeing on the shelves our own dried and canned and goods is that we have a visceral participation in that nature. You know, one of my favorite places, if you ever get to Virginia, come visit us, but also if you go a little bit east, you can go to Williamsburg. But my favorite part of going to Williamsburg is actually not Williamsburg, it is the nearby Powhatan village that they've created. And you go to that village and you go into those huts that the Native Americans had. They were, buffalo and deer skins placed over kind of a lattice work of bent saplings, okay? And imagine they're lying with your beloved, looking up, and of course, this is before chimneys. The Europeans brought chimneys, which was a major improvement over the smokiness, that stopped. But that smokiness lingering around the top of that kind of domed animal skin hut preserved the corn, the fish, the venison, the squash, all the things they did. So all of their food was hanging up in the lattice work of this house. And so you're lying down with your beloved, and imagine being that connected, that visceral, with your sustenance, your provenance. At once you appreciate, wow, there's no Walmart, there's no Kroger, there's no Piggly Wiggly, This is it. And so I'm completely dependent on this. I don't have my hands on the clicker of a fantasy video game that can bring me pepperoni whenever I want, and an Uber driver that can bring me, Chinese takeout. Okay, this is it. So I'm utterly dependent on the one hand, but the other hand is, it's a bunch. Okay. And we worked with that. We participated in it. So it's both the affirmation of we participated in it, had that privilege, but the provision of it. It's just a wonderful balance. Number 9, illegal food. Illegal food. So we have now come to the point, our founders forgot to put one thing in the Bill of Rights. One really big thing. The thing they forgot to put in the Bill of Rights was that every citizen has the right to procure the food of their choice from the source of their choice. They missed it. They gave us the right to worship, speak, assemble, have guns. But what good are all those freedoms if we don't have the freedom to choose the fuel for our bodies to give us the energy to go shoot, pray, and preach? They couldn't have imagined that there would be a day when it would be illegal for you to sell a glass of milk from your Guernsey cow to a neighbor. They couldn't have imagined a day when if somebody wanted to make a chicken pot pie from some old stewing hens in the backyard and sell it to a neighbor at church, or to a friend at church, that would be illegal. So this is a new time. And believe me, these laws are not about food safety, because the prohibition is only on one side of the transaction. It's the seller, not the buyer. All the other things, drugs and all that stuff, there are prohibitions on both buyer and seller. But in food, the prohibition's only on the seller. If you can get raw milk in the black market, you can drink it and feed it to your kids. Goodness, you can go hunting on a 70-degree November day, shoot a deer, and place it prominently on the hood of your Blazer, your Bronco. What do you Amish put yours on? You put it on the hood of the buggy? I don't know. And you can parade this trophy around town, right? And show, look at this big buck I got. 70. Now, after you've drug it a mile through the squirrel dung and the sticks and the rocks in the woods and field gutted it to get it there, right? And then you can take it home, string it up in the backyard in a tree, let it sit there for a week till you got a chance to get it finished, cut up, and you can eat that, feed it to your children. You can have a block party and invite people to come and eat it, and you're a great American. But if you butcher one pig, one steer, a chicken in your backyard at an appropriate temperature day on stainless steel with potable water and all clean, you can give it away. You can give it away. But if you get a dime, you're suddenly a criminal. This is new. Obviously, it's not about hazard. If it were hazardous, you couldn't give it away. I was up in Canada doing a workshop, and I got done, and a lady, an evening speech, and a lady came up. She had this kind of little bag, and she handed it to me. She said, "Here's for later." So I looked in it, and it was a quart of raw milk. So I, kept it secret, signed my books, got done. My host took me back to the hotel. We're riding in the car. He said, what's in it? What did she give you? I said, it's a quart of milk. In Canada, it's illegal to transport raw milk on the highways. I said, this is great. I'll get arrested in Canada for having raw milk on a public road. Folks, this is insane. This is insane. Okay? It's not normal. And so that's why I would like us to have a food emancipation proclamation where we would free up our enslaved food system. I've got a book, 1950, Howard D. Howard Doan, Vertical Diversification. There's pictures in there of people in the 1930s and 40s as canning came in, country people. You know how they made a living, a lot of them? They actually had big gardens and canned green beans and canned pot pie. They didn't make the pot, but canned the gutter, the guts of it, the filling of it. They would can pickled eggs, okay, and sell it to urban customers through the Postal Service with no inspection. Can you imagine how our culture could eliminate their fear of empty store shelves if we would open up the floodgates of neighbor-to-neighbor food commerce? Why can't two consenting adults, I'm using very powerful language here, why can't two consenting adults exercise their voluntary freedom of choice to engage in food transactions without a bureaucrat being involved? When the government gets between my mouth and my throat, that's an invasion of privacy. Ultimately, this is about a democratized access to food, what I call Uberization of the food system. The butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker embedded in the village had their accountability years ago because everybody knew who the schmucks were. Today, Uber, Airbnb, real-time accountability on both buyer and seller create the new village voice and monitoring accountability within the butcher, baker, candlestick maker. And finally, the last one that's abnormal is what I call the victimhood mentality. Too poor, too busy, too ignorant, too confused. So national blame game and a search for entitlement and or government relief. It is time to suck it up like our ancestors did and take personal responsibility. When COVID hit, Mom had a doctor's appointment and they demanded that she get the vaccine. She'll be 99 in December. She looked at the doctor, she said, my generation took Iwo Jima, we aren't scared of a little COVID. I stand on the shoulders of greatness. That's why I am like I am. Throughout history, when catastrophes happen, it's the self-reliant and the independent who pull out of the morass and flourish. You and I can, if there's something to defund, you know what? Let's all defund the junk food industry. Let's all defund Monsanto and every other outfit that thrives on victimhood and negligence. And let's get with it and let's embrace it. Let's fill our pantries with our own canned goods and our own participatory provenance and sustenance that we ultimately realize we're dependent, but we're also affirmed as participants. That's a great combination. So when we lie down in our modern beds with our beloved, a few steps away is provenance that we know has come from a benevolent creator, and we've come alongside as participants. So that as the culture moves into helplessness and hopelessness, we can offer a roadmap to helping and providing hope when everything else is collapsing. God help us to do it. Thanks for letting me visit with you.
Keep it coming. We're very happy that Joel was able to come. Okay, more to follow. He's going to be back on this stage tomorrow morning, so hopefully you can all stay to see what he has to say tomorrow. Justin Rhodes, for those of you that looked at schedule changes, his son was in a bad four-wheeler accident, so that's why he's not here today, but he is flying in this morning. I think he is arriving in about an hour. He will be here in the afternoon, but will be speaking twice tomorrow. So, okay. So we have our next speaker is my good friend and partner in crime, Marcus Wengard. He has a topic that I find really fascinating, and this is a Marcus original, and he's going to be talking to you about seeds, and his argument is that it is the only currency of the planet, which is a pretty innovative idea. He's a very multifaceted, multi-talented individual, and he is the current owner of Berlin Seeds. So please welcome to the stage my friend Marcus Wengard.
Thank you, John. I'm pretty sure that, yes, I have some talents, but I know that I have a lot of people around me that have more talents than I do, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Planning an event like this reminded me that I have a lot of really, really good, hardworking, honest people work with. Thought-provoking message from Joel Salatin. His life has been a testimony of someone who is willing to go against the normal and pay the price for what he believes is the right thing to do. So my title for my message today is Seeds, the Currency of the Planet. And this title started a while ago. I was spending some time in my office just meditating, and God asked me, what are the five, I was asking God, what should I be thinking about? What should I be spending my time on? And the question came to me, what are the 5 basic needs of human beings? And part of the reason I believe it was God asking me the question, not myself, is I didn't know that there were 5 basic needs. So I started counting. I said, well, there's you. You're my basic need. There's family. And of course I include in that our church family. So God, family, food, shelter, and clothing. God, family, food, shelter, and clothing are basic needs. And then God asked me, when in your life have you ever worried about any of those 5 things? And I chuckled a little bit and said, well, I've worried, but I've never really worried. From the time I was 13 and a half years old, or maybe 12 and a half years old, every day that I got up, I knew what I was going to work that day, or had a good idea of what I was going to work that day. And I always had food. I always had a great family, good church, a loving God that takes care of us. So I've never really worried about any of those 5 things. And I believe God said, well, I'm glad you didn't worry, because I tell you in my word not to worry, but it doesn't hurt to think about them. And then he said, do you think if you went to work every day and you never thought about your wife, would you be surprised if you'd go home one day and find her not there? If you don't think about something, don't be surprised when one day you wake up and it's not there. So my thoughts started down the path of which one of those 5 things should I be thinking about. And after a time, I landed on food. And one of the reasons I landed on food was because I noticed around me there was a seemingly increasing number of people that had these strange problems. Strange problems that it seems like only mind-altering drugs would calm down. Ativan and Prozac. Just emotional problems that just seemed like, okay, what's the problem here? And I don't know, but I wonder if our food plays into why we have so many of those problems. And if our food and the quality of our food plays into it, then the quality of our food can also be a solution. So that thought process led me to consider the beginning of food. David Klein, a friend of mine that I got to know back between the 7th and 8th grade, when I would bike 12 to 13 miles up towards Fredericksburg from Walnut Creek and help with thrashing and shocking wheat and work on the farm. In just a casual conversation a few years ago, he said, we are seed-eating creatures, or we are a seed-eating species, I think he said. And that little phrase stuck, and that's what that's what kept me on the topic of seeds. So my title this morning is Seeds, the Currency of the Planet. I'd like to suggest to you, and it's a bit of an audacious claim, but it's intended to get you to think. Seed is the only currency on the planet. We have money, we use money to buy and sell things and as a medium of exchange, but I've never seen anyone plant a $100 bill. Never tried it myself either. So the dictionary definition of currency is something that's used as a medium of exchange. Well, we don't use seeds as a medium of exchange today, although there were days in China and Japan that they did. But I believe seed could be used as a medium of exchange, and the reason I believe seed would work as a currency is because seed is portable. In order for seed to sustain energy in us, it has to be planted in the earth, and so we have to have a strong, healthy soil to put the seed in. But we wouldn't use the soil as a medium of exchange because, we don't want to put a wheelbarrow full of dirt and go take it as an exchange for something. But seed, we could use seed as a medium of exchange. Seed has intrinsic value. There's, of course, we have to plant the seed, but seed in and of itself has intrinsic value. The dollar bill that I carry around doesn't really have intrinsic value. I can print 1 million of those in a week. It wouldn't work very well, but I could print a bunch of them. So the dollar bill doesn't have intrinsic value. It has value because you and I believe it has value, and we use it as if it had value, and it works, and it's a good system. But it's not as powerful as seed is. Seed multiplies when we use it properly, and seed and what grows from seed, of course, sustains our life. And you can't say that about our currency system. So if seed is currency, my question to you is, are you wealthy? If seed is currency, are you wealthy? About a year ago, I purchased Berlin seeds, and one could say that I'm talking about seeds because I want to sell seeds to all of you. And yes, that might be true, but the real heart of the matter is that I bought Berlin seeds because I want to make sure that everyone that I can make wealthy with seeds, that I have a way to do that. So a lot of times when we talk about wealth, we immediately think about money. I'd like to tell you that wealth is a lot more than money. Wealth is related to our resources, our natural resources, how we use them, our skills in using our natural resources. Diligence, honesty, faithfulness, and thankfulness and generosity are just a few things that I consider a measure of wealth rather than the money that we carry in our pockets. Another question that I'll put on the table is, if tomorrow morning we woke up or if this morning we woke up and there were no money system, what would we do? I hope that doesn't happen. I'm not suggesting that it happens, that will happen. I'm just asking the question, if tomorrow morning we got up and our money system didn't work, what would we do? I think it's a question worth thinking about. I think it's a question worth arranging our lives around. I don't think our money system will vanish. I don't think that will happen, but I still think that's a good core to think about life, because it helps us do things that aren't necessarily related to profit. So if seed is the currency of our planet, we can't help but think about our current condition regarding seeds. Today, 4 corporations control over 50% of our planet's seed. And I'm not here to speak evil of those corporations. What I do want to say is, I think the answer to seed and wealth with seed rests in our hands. It rests in the hands of individuals making the right decision today for a better future. I don't know the insides of those corporations, but I do know that corporations rise and fall based on profit. So if a corporation doesn't turn a profit, then they don't exist. They have to turn a profit. So that profit can become a distraction to corporations, where they're after a profit more than they are the health and well-being of human beings. And I don't think, as individuals here, I don't think we should farm out that responsibility to corporations. I don't think we should farm out the responsibility for our health and well-being to corporations. Those corporations also don't seem to pay a lot of attention to soil health and crop nutrition. The phenomenon is very similar to many other areas in our life. Having something that is really good quality is hard work. You can have it cheap, you can have it fast, or you can have it good quality. And you usually need to pick two of those three. In life, generally, we don't find all three of those in one package. If we do, we should make sure we have some of it. If we can find it cheap and high quality and quick. Usually we have to pick two of those three, and we can't have all of them. So when corporations produce food, they have to turn a profit. The food can't spoil on the shelf or their profit vanishes. So it's important to them that they create something that they can sell, something that tastes good, and something that doesn't sit on the shelf, of course, and that they can make a profit in doing so. That system has created we have an amazing food system in operation in our world today, where food can be grown, harvested, preserved, put in packages, and made available on grocery stores for us to purchase at a very economical price. So the system that is in operation today is amazing. However, sometimes I'm concerned that our money system and our lifestyle, it seems that we could be short-circuiting nature. And we can pull nature, we can stretch nature to fit our desires, but at some point we'll have stretched nature far enough. And nature is good. Nature always wins. Nature always goes back to where it wants to be. We can stretch it and pull it and make it do all sorts of things, but it always goes back to where it should be. We are the first generation of people, this is in my opinion, we're the first generation of people on the planet that think about food in daily and weekly terms. The generations prior to us thought about food in annual terms, and they didn't have this, go to McDonald's and buy a burger and call it a day mentality. They thought about their food in annual terms. I'm suggesting that we do more of that, and I feel like I'm talking to people that already do that, but that's still something that I believe we should pay more attention to. We pay a high price for a food experience. You go to a really expensive restaurant, we don't come home talking about how nutritious the food was. We talk about the taste of the food. Sometimes we talk about how much we spent for the food. But we talk about the taste of the food, we enjoy the experience of having food prepared for us, and that's all good. I'd like to add to those two things that we should pay attention to nutrition. One of the things that we, of course, see on our grocery shelves is gluten-free. It seems that everything has to be marked gluten-free. It's like, you want to sell eggs? You mark it gluten-free so that somebody buys gluten-free eggs. Well, that proves some of our ignorance in where gluten exists. I believe that wheat, when I first started processing the gluten problem, I thought, really, we can't eat wheat? Why couldn't we eat wheat? That's such a staple. Why would wheat be bad for anyone? And I'll share my perspective. Let's take a look at the steps of wheat. You have a wheat producer that is producing seed for farmers to raise wheat. You have the farmer. You have the mill that buys the grain from the farmer, and then the bakery. So in order to make bread, that I call it poof bread, where the bread is just spongy and and soft, you need a good amount of gluten to get that expanding effect. So imagine a seed company making seed for the farmer. They want to engineer a seed that has a high gluten content and a large kernel. So if you can produce a large kernel and high gluten content, by the time that grain leaves the farmer's field and gets into your loaf of bread, the farmer has made money, the seed producer makes money because they produce a high bulk of seed, so that the farmer gets paid by the bushels. The bakery gets paid by how many loaves of bread they can make from that bushel. And if everyone wants to make a profit, everyone in line is going to stretch that dollar as far as they can. So I wonder if we haven't engineered ourselves into a problem where we've over-engineered our wheat, and now our bodies can no longer process what was normal at one time. Our bodies can no longer handle it because we've taxed our bodies with too much gluten. The second thing I want to look at is monosodium glutamate. Monosodium glutamate was discovered by a Japanese chemist that would eat at this certain restaurant, and he noticed that on a certain day their soup was always amazing. And you can find this on Wikipedia. You have to look a little bit, but you can find this on Wikipedia. Not that everything on Wikipedia is factual, but at least this is there. Monosodium glutamate, this Japanese chemist found that on that particular day, the restaurant would use seaweed in the soup. And he narrowed it down to that, figured out how to extract monosodium glutamate from the seaweed, and his idea was that monosodium glutamate is always present in high protein foods. So monosodium glutamate, although it has a bad name today, is in nature, and monosodium glutamate, I believe, and he believed, is the signal that is the chemical that sends the signal to our bodies saying, this is good for you, eat a bunch of it, because there's a lot of protein in this food. Well, the problem is when we extract monosodium glutamate from a cheap source or a non-tasty source, and we put that monosodium glutamate on a nutrient deprived food. Now all of a sudden you have food that has no nutritional value. You put accent or monosodium glutamate on that food. Our bodies, if we consume that, every signal in our body says, eat more, there's a lot of protein in this, eat more. And so now we end up overeating because of the engineering of monosodium glutamate, which in its natural form, monosodium glutamate is good for us. It's just part of nature that says, eat a bunch, this is good for you. So could it be that we've engineered our way out of good health? Hopefully I have done a little bit of work to convince you that taking individual responsibility for seed, soil, and food sourcing is the right thing for you to do, and you can do it. That's what I'd like to do with what I share with you today. So here's what it could look like. If you're overwhelmed by the thought of okay, what do I do with food? How do I grow my own food? Just pick one thing. My advice to you is just pick one thing that you like, that you really like, and that you could afford to spend your time raising one thing. The second thing that I'd like for you to consider is find a local farmer that you could join up with. Farmers are intelligent people, and they won't raise crops that they don't have a buyer for. If they raise crops that they don't have a buyer for, then they go broke. So why would you raise crops that you don't have a buyer for? So as a culture, as a community, if we can link arms with a farmer that we believe takes care of his soil, takes care of his seed, and cares for his children. If you have a farmer that cares about his, we won't feed our children crap. So if we link arms with a farmer that cares about that, that's one way that we can be responsible for seed, soil, and our own food sourcing. We pay attention to nutrition. Most people won't talk about it. It's like a lot of places in life where if we can sell something without talking to the consumer about what really matters, then we can fudge what really matters and sell a bill of goods. So pay attention to nutrition and spend your money with people who do the same. Learn how to process and preserve your own food. Our body gets energy from eating something that is alive. And the longer that food is stored, the more it's preserved, the less life it has. So food that's preserved, in some ways, could be just food that's dead, but it doesn't smell. And the last thing is, don't eat too much. Our bodies are amazing, and this is a problem that I have. Don't eat too much. Our bodies are amazing in digesting food and finding the nutrition and getting rid of the rest. But if we overtax our bodies and eat too much, then our body gives up and says, okay, I don't know what to do with all this. I'm tired. I don't want to go through here and find a cheeseburger in a dumpster. I just don't know what to do with it. So be careful when you eat nutritious food. It may take less. Don't dish out the same helpings that you did when you were eating junk food. So I own Berlin Seeds. Don't all go buy seeds from Berlin Seeds. Buy seeds from whoever you buy seeds from, but take responsibility for seed. Take individual responsibility. Save your own seed. It's not as hard as you think. Save your own seed. Share seed with each other, and pay attention to the nutrition in the food that you're eating. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I've encouraged you to choose the tough path today for a better tomorrow.
Thank you, Marcus. Next up, we have the owner and founder of Walnut Creek Foods, Mark Koblenz. He's also a very good friend of mine. He's one of the two people that called me needing lids. So he's going to talk about a supply chain for a sustainable lifestyle. Please welcome Mark Koblenz.
Good morning. What a great event and a beautiful day. About 50 years ago, my sister worked at the local IGA store, and there was a unique individual that showed up once a year. It was a local farmer, and he hitched up his team of horses to the hay wagon, and he basically bought all the groceries for the winter on that shopping trip. My sister related how that when he was done shopping, the floor of that hay wagon was completely filled with groceries. She remembers he bought cases of cornflakes and cases of saltines. Now that's about the only facts I know about that, but we could very likely conjecture how his lifestyle was. Very likely what preceded that trip was sending a load of hogs to the Mount Hope auction, and when the check came, he took the check to the Kilbuck Savings Bank in Berlin, and then took out some cash to pay for the groceries, and very likely buy some shoes for the kids and a stop at the fabric store. So it's not just a phrase when we say life was simpler back then. People lived life a lot simpler. But life is always simpler when we're only looking at the bare necessities of life, only what is needed to survive, the basics of food, clothing, and shelter. Simple life also supports independence, and we like the sound of that. It's got a good ring. Our country was founded on independence. We teach independence to our kids. But All of this just kind of smacks of survival. I'm sure our friend with a hay wagon full of groceries had life outside of survival. I'm sure he attended church and a wedding or two and the machinery sale and maybe a horse auction. But does that count as anything more than survival? Probably not. Because while independence is great, a much better choice is interdependence. Independence looks at our own survival, but interdependence takes responsibility for our own actions while still realizing that we are part of a human network. It recognizes we were designed, created to need each other. There's many skilled people here today, but it would be an odd person here that's great at tending a herd of cows and also makes the best saltines. The best gardener that's here is probably not all that good at doing taxes. April 15th is the time of the year when her plants are crying to her, "We need you. Don't do your taxes today." We need each other. And while the focus of this conference is to live independently, I just say let's wait up before we get our Get Off the Grid bumper sticker applied to our back bumper. In a gathering of this size, I'm sure there's a number of people that envy the lifestyle of that farmer with his hay wagon filled with groceries. I'm not one of them. While independence is a worthwhile goal, the greater goal to me is interdependence. At Walnut Creek Foods, we're the cornflakes and the saltines in this story. We're in the food business and have been for 45 years, distributing food products to numerous stores. We sell to a few thousand stores in 29 states. Our organization also includes manufacturing and retail, all part of a distribution system getting food for a sustainable lifestyle. Our sweet spot in selling our food is to sell to communities that are comprised primarily of Anabaptist communities. And as Amish and Mennonite folks start moving out and forming new communities, they usually, one or two of those families want to open up a bulk food stores, and they call us. But it wasn't always like that. In the early days, we had a lot of convincing to do. And I didn't consider myself too much of a salesman because I enjoyed operations. I relished the thought of adding products that our customers couldn't resist purchasing or of making something more efficient. Both volume and efficiency decrease costs, which I found is again a sweet spot for many of our retail customers. But since nobody else in our organization wanted the title of being a salesperson, I filled that role too. My problem was twofold. I didn't have enough time to make it a priority, and then a little bit of knowledge kind of hurt me a little bit too, because I knew that we were the most efficient distributor. I thought retailers would automatically purchase from us if they had but that information from us. In other words, customers that didn't purchase from us are ignorant, but they'll smarten up, and then they'll fix that ignorance. Many people call that attitude arrogance. I was a little too simple to understand even that. But it wasn't until years later that I realized how sales really work. This was after we had a number of salespeople on our team. I think we've got Freeman Coons in the audience today. Thank you for showing us what a professional salesperson really is. I've enjoyed working with you for the past 27 years. Anyway, I only realized how sales really work once I realized we're all in this together. Whether it's a farmer, a broker, a manufacturer, we need to source our product from somebody. Since we're in business for a lifetime, we'd like our producers and providers and also our customers to have that same long-term mentality. And do we know what does it take for people to be in business for a lifetime? They need to flourish. We need to flourish. In many situations, flourishing, or as the accountant calls it, profits are taken for granted. But we all know it's never that easy. If we desire our providers to flourish, we approach them differently from only having a transactional mindset. We respect them. We make it a priority to pay on time. We don't feast and famine with our orders. We don't nickel and dime them to death. We want to make life better for them, and we operate accordingly. We also help startups. We have with people that have a vision for a certain product and that have found by distributing their products through our channels, it makes the difference between sustainability and failure. The same mindset also goes to our customers. Unless our products and our service helps them flourish, we have no reason to darken their doorway. Our salespeople have nothing to sell unless it's a benefit to that retailer. So the key to sustainability is to desire each other to do well, for them to flourish. How do we know we're getting the job done? They don't share their P&Ls with us. The best metric is simply to determine interdependence is whether we're treating others the way we want to be treated. At Walnut Creek Foods, we have one word for that. We call it respect. It's plain and simple, respect. We treat others the way we want to be treated. So we want our vendors, we want our customers to do well. If they're unprofitable for an extended period of time, they go out of business. And we've got a little key. We've got a credit collection department at our Walnut Creek Foods, and we've got a little internal joke that we use. If somebody uses the word Amish in their top line, they are going to get a credit collection call from us sooner or later. Why? They're a wannabe. They're not authentic. And so that's your dead giveaway. If they use Amish in the title of their name, they're not true Amish. And they will get a collection call from us. Just a little bit of a side note there. But for those that are authentic, we want them to do business. And if they're not in business, we're out of business too. And so we want them to flourish. That's the key. So respect is the first and the core value that leads to sustainability. I've also mentioned the other two, efficiency and volume. Let's delve into them a little bit further too. Efficiency is a great word, but just like independence has a better word in interdependence, efficiency has a better word if we term it stewardship. And that's the word we use at Walnut Creek Foods. Stewardship is a lifestyle. Efficiency is but a metric, and it makes for a very poor lifestyle. In fact, we're setting ourselves up for failure if efficiency is the lifestyle we choose. Stewardship, however, can be practiced for a lifetime. In fact, it should be practiced for a lifetime. It should be practiced for multi-generations. Recently, my son's in real estate, and we were discussing about 2 farms in Walnut Creek Township that transferred from father to son. And both of those had dollar amounts on them that were way below market value. I applaud that. That's what we need to do if we are to be sustainable. We can't sell out for the biggest dollar. We need to make it happen so that the next generation can also be sustainable. At Walnut Creek Foods, our definition of stewardship is to maximize our God-given resources and obsessively reduce waste. And we do it with the future generations in mind. The third critical value in sustainable food distribution is growth. For most of my career, I've spent very little time being concerned about supply issues. Only as the effects of COVID and government subsidies have come about has it caused a hiccup in our economy. And we've seen massive shortages over the last 18 months. This is temporary. It's a simple problem of too much cash and not enough labor. And it's much of this is generated by a government without the ability to say no. Somebody wants $1, they'll send it to them. If somebody wants much more, it seems like they send it to them also, because they're buying votes. But this is temporary, because this will equalize. Cash and goods can only be out of balance for a limited amount of time. Of much more concern are the problems with disease and famine. And we've been blessed in America with an abundance of food. The current avian flu, bird flu, and the chicken, egg, and turkey shortages that have come about because of it are a stark reminder of this. It is, again, just only in my opinion, but because of the short cycle of birth to market for the proteins that chickens involve, I think this also will be short-lived. It would be a whole lot worse if it's a famine that lasts for multiple years, or if it affects larger herd animals. So hopefully, that's like, again, just don't put this down as the perspective of somebody that knows all about this. This is just an opinion. Hopefully, again, we'll see these high turkey prices come down, high chicken prices, because for the most part, we know especially in areas where there's money to be made, usually people will show up, and if something can be produced in a short amount of time, it will happen fairly quickly. It used to be different back in the 50s. My dad was a chicken farmer, and that was long before contracts were given by feed companies, so that there was almost no risk to the farmer. And his flocks contacted coccidiosis. That's a bacterial disease, an intestinal bacteria, which doesn't allow the chicken to absorb the nutrients. You can imagine what happened. Dad kept feeding the chickens, and they didn't grow. Naturally, he ended up with huge losses, and it happened over multiple times. It affected us for many years growing up. The poverty that happened just from having a feed bill that was still existing while the chickens were long gone. Those are the sorts of things that are much more problematic. And it's the same way with famine. That's a foreign word for us in America. That could put us in the same kind of in the same kind of a bind. It's not my job to scare us today. There's many people here with much more knowledge than I ever will. And I bring up famine because growth is the core value to sustainability. But while agricultural growth is critical, so also is our personal growth, our ability to learn, our ability to study problems and come up with solutions. Most of you have never heard of coccidiosis because somebody somewhere made it a personal passion to fix that problem. And that's why we don't have that problem nowadays. That person didn't solve that problem just by picking this up by accident. And while these are major problems, everyday problems work the same way. If we have an ongoing problem from solutions from our past, we've got to come up with new solutions. One of my favorite sayings is we're perfectly set up for the results that we're getting. Recently, the CEO of a company sent out an email to a number of his team members, and he was just bemoaning the fact that there's only a small percentage of people are doing a certain task right. Well, there's two reasons why people don't do a task right. First of all, they're either not trained to do it right, or they don't know why they should do it right. Both of those situations come back to management, to the CEO taking responsibility for it. We've got a little bit of that same problem in one of our divisions. Some people aren't operating according to what the values that we are espousing, and it comes back to us training them. Thankfully, I've got somebody on my management team that is ready and willing to put a training program in place where that gets remedied. Sustainability is not possible without growth. Let's take a lesson from nature. We were all created. We were all designed for growth. And We need new tools constantly. We were made to be lifetime learners. There is no retirement from learning. An organization won't grow unless its people grow as individuals. But you've all got an edge up. You signed up for this conference. This indicates your willingness and your readiness to learn. Use this knowledge you gain to make life better for others. Use it and practice respect. You may not have realized it, but my presentation today is but an info commercial for Walnut Creek Foods. The 3 keys to sustainability are the 3 values that we have identified as core to our operations at Walnut Creek Foods: respect, stewardship, and growth. They're reflected on our cutting board. Since we're in the food industry, we picked a cutting board to reflect what we want to do. And they're best summed up by the first line on that cutting board. We are in the food industry to make life better for each other and for those less fortunate. We're incredibly blessed with a team of people that live this goal every day in their work lives. And I invite you all to take that same approach in your quest for sustainability. Only as we look out for the welfare of others will we be sustainable. God bless.
Thank you, Mark. Walnut Creek Foods is just down the road a couple miles, so if you want to stop by and see them, and they have the retail outlet is Walnut Creek Cheese. Okay, while they get wired up backstage, I did want to recognize the fact that we have a lot of sponsors that were very generous in making this event possible. And Provia is one of the big ones, and they're very explicit about the purpose. And this is one of the things that the companies in this area share, is a very strong sense of wanting to do the right thing. Let me read to you the purpose of Provia. Our purpose is to let our light shine before others so that they may see our good works and give glory to our Father in heaven. So then we have the gold sponsors, Nature's Warehouse, All-American Canner. You know, they're here with a lot of aluminum canners, Plain Values, Lehman's, Fillmore, Walnut Creek, and Peebles. So we're going to change course here a little bit. We have 2 special guests with us that are going to talk and show you some pictures of the devastation of the Kentucky flood. So I went down to, when we talked to Ricky Skaggs about a concert, he wanted to make it a fundraiser event. So I went down and met with Shallon and Mark and personally toured the area. And the media has not done justice to the actual damage that has occurred. So Shallon has a Instagram following of over 50,000 people. She was one of the first to promote our product, and it's been a pleasure to get to know her and her husband, Mark. The Appalachian homestead is snugly tucked into the mountains of central Appalachia. Mark and Shallon come from a long line of mountaineer homesteaders who saw fit to preserve and pass down the wisdom of their ancestral ways, which are kept alive still today in practice on their family homesteads. They share these family ways with the world via the Appalachian Homestead social community. So please help me welcome to the stage Mark and Shallon.
Good morning. And we love John, but it's Appalachia. It's Appalachia.
It's Appalachia, yeah, for sure.
It's Appalachia.
Say Appalachia, and we'll throw in Appalachia.
Yeah. When discussions first started, really between Shallon and John, we were going to come up and talk about canning, food independence, sustainability, but then a gigantic, devastating flood happened right across the county line from us. And we've heard a lot about community, community, community. And we saw that in the area yesterday. It's beautiful, and everyone seemed to be family and community, and you can just feel that. So our community doesn't stop at the county line. It doesn't stop at the state line. We actually live across the ridge line in Virginia. The floods happened a little bit in Virginia, nothing like they did in eastern Kentucky. It was devastating, and I hate to use the word biblical, but some of the terms that are thrown around by the weather and those folks on the TV, this was a biblical event. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event. So Shallon's going to tell you more about that. She's more intimately involved with some people over there to help them out. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to show you some videos and slides of the area just to show you what we're talking about.
Hi, I'm Shallon from the Appalachian Homestead. So Mark was telling you that we live in Wise County, Virginia. So we are directly over the ridgeline from Letcher County, Kentucky. Where we're from, the shared struggles of living in a boom and bust economy have united the people of that region. Unlike in more urban settings, when our neighbors are suffering, it is right in our faces, and most of the time it's someone that we've known our entire lives. On July 28th, following nearly 25 consecutive days with rainfall each day, as dog days had set in wet on July 3rd, an additional 6 inches of rain fell in the hours between midnight and 6 a.m., and the rain continued that day to fall at a rate of a ½ inch per hour. On the previous day, July 27th at 10 p.m., the North Fork of the Kentucky River was slightly elevated from its normal 2-foot depth to 4 feet. Just 12 hours later, at 10 a.m. on July 28th, that river crested at nearly 20 feet. This beat former flood records by over 5 feet. Following the deluge that fell on the 28th, rain showers continued on and off to flood and reflood this area until August 11th, as dog days ended. Now, these areas of eastern Kentucky, which had never before flooded, began to fill up, washing homes and people away. Dams ruptured in Letcher County. Children were swept from the arms of their parents, and the elderly, who could not stand against the wild currents that had overtaken the small streams by their homes, were swept away. And then volunteers who had rushed to the aid of their neighbors began to fall ill with illnesses that were unknown, and some died. By the end of the first week, more than 40 people had lost their lives, and more than 10,000 homes were damaged or destroyed. 2,990 of those were in one county alone, the county that neighbors ours, Letcher County, Kentucky. When John came down and we toured with him, we introduced him to a family that we had met earlier in that week who were living in a tent by the place where their home once stood. Their home had been utterly destroyed, washed more than 100 feet downriver. As we were talking to them, they reported to us that they had only weeks prior paid the final payment on their mortgage. Others lost homes that they had just purchased as new families just starting out. Many more than that, though, lost family homes that had stood for generations. In the wake of this disaster, neighbors like us from Wise County came from high ground to low to seek any and all whom we could help. There was only one hotel in Letcher County, Kentucky, so impacted residents took refuge in tents atop the mountains, and they flooded across our county line and spread far and wide into the homes of relatives who were able to take on additional people. Slowly, very, very slowly, the media began to notice and report about the historic flooding that had occurred. As is typical, a few larger organizations came to the more interstate accessible areas of Kentucky, but those in the more mountainous areas, such as Letcher County, where we're next door neighbors to, along winding back roads tucked deep in hollers, the very areas that were hit the hardest, where the people are the poorest, they continue to suffer unaided and unnoticed. After exhausting local church resources and our personal resources in the first day or two, we began to report on social media about the plight of people in Letcher County, Kentucky. The slides that we are going to show you are primarily from Letcher and Pike counties in Kentucky. And while Pike is more economically stable, Letcher is among the poorest counties in America. Pike suffered some damage, but Letcher County was ground zero for this historic flood event. With its steep terrain featuring ditch-like hollers that wind far back into the mountains, and small waterways that are in each holler, all coming out to feed the North Fork of the Kentucky River, but yet none of them that could contain the water that fell from the sky that day, which seemed to pour in streams. It was unlike any rain that we had ever witnessed in our lifetimes. Were it raining that hard here today, I would not be able to see even the people who are sitting in this first row. In true mountaineer fashion, the men came together, bringing their own farm equipment to gain access to communities that went without any assistance in the initial 24 to 48 hours of the flood. Chief Alan Borms of Neon, Kentucky Police reported that he borrowed without permission a piece of equipment belonging to a local power company so that he could shore up a way to get across a stream into the devastated community of McRoberts, Kentucky, the community which he has served for many years. And he began to check on its citizens, one house at a time, noting that more than half a dozen of the law enforcement vehicles had been washed away in the flood, and several more were damaged by flood waters. Not to mention the number of landslides and washouts and bridge collapses which occurred. Borms and many other first responders went into these haulers on four-wheelers and ATVs to help anyone that they could, with the thoughts and memories of their own devastated homes and families keeping them company. Night and day they worked to help everyone else before many days later, returning to their own homes and families and beginning to try to clean up. Following the flood, most citizens of Letcher County were without 2 weeks of electricity, if they even had a home to have electricity sent to. They were also without running potable water to their taps, and many whose homes did survive, even today, are still without sewage. The lines are damaged so badly they cannot be used. There are people in Letcher County today living in tents. Winter is coming, and winter in Central Appalachians at the elevations that we live at are brutal and relentless. You see the very small foothills of the mountains that we call home right here in this area. These people need help. They needed it 2 months ago. But now as winter approaches, they desperately need it. They need safe and warm shelter. Here we are today, nearly 2 months post-flood. Neon and Letcher County, Kentucky have still seen very little in the way of outside assistance. As is typically the case, local churches outside the flood zone and those from the area with the means to do so continue to send help to our neighbors across the ridgeline that we watch the sun set through each evening. Today, we are here as representatives of our neighbors in Letcher County, Kentucky, and we thank you for generously donating to LifeNets. LifeNets is the only organization participating in this event that is reaching directly deep into the most remote hollers and the hardest hit areas of far southeastern Kentucky. I ask you that you would please select LifeNets as your choice for where to donate for this event. You can do that by visiting foodindependence.life/donate.php and simply click the LifeNets button and donate directly to the people who were impacted in Letcher County and the surrounding areas. I thank you guys. We're going to show you some slides and talk with you about that.
Guys, the guys in the back did a great job pacing those. We've been watching them while you've been speaking and providing a great background. Good job back there. Good job. We do have it's an audio track, if you want to talk about Corey.
Yeah, so Corey, his name's Corey Michael Harris. He is a young man from Letcher County, Kentucky, who the morning after the flood, as the sun began to rise, penned a song. And it is just absolutely so representative of our area and of the events that occurred there on July 28th. This is Whitesburg, Kentucky. It is the county seat of Letcher County.
The North Fork couldn't hold all the dark sky laid down. Folks made for the hills, water raged through these towns. Death and destruction, hope all but gone. Begging for mercy and praying for sun. Through hell and high water, they reached out their hands, pulled folks from the depths, put them back on dry land. Down in eastern Kentucky, the devil tried and he failed. Come hell or high water, these mountains prevail. Choppers and lifeboats and strangers all came to help pick up the pieces for those who remained. Those who were lost, we just pray for their souls. To fly on these mountains for winds couldn't hold the North Fork till it's built. But you can't wash away all the strength in these hills.
We want to thank you guys for giving generously from your hearts to the people of southeastern Kentucky who were impacted by this devastating flood event.
Prayer is priceless. It's priceless. Sometimes that's all they had was prayer. So if you can't donate, choose not to, that's fine. But please take a second to pray for these folks. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You saw the pictures. I went down there myself, and pictures don't really tell the whole story. So we are taking donations. I think there's a donation box in the back for those of you that want to give. This is going through an organization. I know the people, and 100% of the money is going to go directly to the people down there. So, okay. We have a panel discussion of some of the presenters, and we're going to probably cut this short a little bit because the wind's coming along. We're putting some sidewalls on to try to contain that a little bit. And more importantly, we have a lunch being cooked. We have an Amish wedding feast right behind us in this tent. We actually butchered 2 cows. That's for tomorrow. Today we have chicken. So there's lots of food. I mean, you can't. When I talked to Joel, we had a call, and one of the questions Marcus asked was, what are some common mistakes that happen at these kinds of events? And he said, well, not having enough food. Food trucks don't show up. So we solved that problem. We have Byler's, and they brought in a whole kitchen this morning before I even got here. So there's lots of food. So we have that to look forward to. Okay, we're going to bring to the stage now myself, Joel Salatin, Marcus Wingard, and Matt Keeler, who's standing in for Mark Copeland's from Walnut Creek Foods, and we'll just have a discussion about some of the things they said. What we really want to do here is to discuss what is it that you can do. You know, theory is great, but if there's no practical application, then nobody is helped. So we're going to discuss that, and then I'll be back up just to give some instructions on the rest of the day, and then we have a lot of things planned for you this afternoon in the other tents. Gentlemen, the question is whether the mics will work. Test. There we go. Test. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being willing to come out here, and judging by the size of the crowd, I think that at least was a success. What I wanted to do here in this discussion is to just raise a couple questions, and you can pose your own on what we can practically do. I mean, we have different perspectives and different people that are part of the food supply chain. So I think I'm going to start out with this question, and maybe direct it at Joel, and Matt, you can follow up on it as well. Not everybody has the good fortune of being able to have 10 acres or 20 or even 5. I mean, here we have that. So what can someone do that has just a little bit of land to go towards sustainability? Maybe I'll toss it over to Matt first of all.
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess in terms of where we come in, I mean, you know, we view ourselves as providing quality foods to rural communities, and And so we try to support people moving from more of an urban to a rural, or people already living in a rural community. And I think the biggest thing is, as a supplier in that process, is working with your local stores or your food sources to ask for the quality foods that you want, that you need. I think that's, as a supplier for us, we basically offer the items that our customers are asking for. And so I think that's probably just, from our standpoint, the biggest way that we need help to help people live a more sustainable lifestyle.
Joel, you have something to add to that?
Well, I'm a big believer in doing all you can yourself, and I mean that's the first bulwark, if you will, in resiliency. And so you can put a quart jar on the windowsill and sprout mung beans to have sprouts. They're very nutritious. You can get hanging, all these urban gardening things. You can get hanging pocketed PVC pipes for the porch that you can have your own fresh herbs in. There's the difference between fresh herbs and whatever preserved herbs is remarkable. You can have a beehive on the roof of the house. Bees fly; they don't need to be on the ground. So you can use roof space and do that. You can take PVC and cut it in like gutters, and have basically a Venetian blind vertical garden on the southern exposure of your house. Then you can cut off the air conditioner, because the evapotranspiration of all the plants will suck all the heat out of the house, so you don't have to run an air conditioner, and it'll keep things warm. Cool. And then in the winter you can have a solarium. Our house was built in 1790. We have a state-of-the-art cedar-built solarium kit on the south side. We get passive solar in the winter. We can grow leafy greens and cool seed, not tomatoes and peppers, but in the winter, even when it's 0, that thing will stay warm. And so there's a lot in your house right there that you can do that from a production standpoint, from a provenance standpoint. I'm a big believer in know your farmer, know your food. And so we now have shipping capacity, the ability to distribute that we've never had before. And logistics, as you know, logistics is way different than it was 20 or 30 years ago, and we can tap into that and develop our own personal supply chain.
So I have a follow-up to that, Joel. How much, you mentioned basically farming on the roof of your house and your back porch and all of that, but just from a practical standpoint, do you have any statistics? Do I need an acre? Do I need 2 acres? Do I need 10 acres to really be able to raise enough food to feed my family?
Well, John Jevons, the French biointensive guru, says that you can pretty much produce all of your own food on less than 1,200 square feet. Well, that's not that much.
That's smaller than a house.
That's smaller than a house. Yeah. So, and he's saying all of it. Maybe not your beef, but or maybe cheese, but certainly all of your produce and vegetables. So, think of even. You go to Italy. Houses there. All the houses they have espalier cucumber vines growing up the side of the house. Trellises. Okay. Goodness, they even in Italy they even have all the interstate clover leaves. I think the rule of thumb is each of those takes 40 acres. Okay, so the clover leaf of an interstate takes 40 acres. Well, what they do is individuals they designate areas in that 40-acre clover leaf, and each person has like a half acre, and so they have 80 gardens in that 40-acre. Well, I guess some of it's road, but anyway, they'll have a bunch of gardens. People come out there, they spend the weekend working in their garden, and then they take their produce back into town and live in town the week. They bicycle out, or they take their little itty bitty vehicles out there. It's just all over the world. People are very creative about poking stuff into small spaces. Here, we haven't been hungry enough.
Right, I mean,
We haven't
we've
been
got
hungry
too much space.
We got too much space. But if you're interested in this, it's amazing what spaces you can find. It's amazing what spaces you can find.
So,
John, can I add one thing? So one thing the great comment you made, Joel, during your talk was just about if you don't have any leftovers, you're probably not doing any home cooking. And I thought that was a great point. And I think one of the things we can do, I mean, I don't need to tell the people in this room to cook more meals at home because that's already happening. But outside, using the influence that you have to encourage home cooking, because if you're not cooking at home, you don't have a need for herbs, you don't have a need for whole ingredients, and that's where a lot of this starts, in my opinion.
Right. In my normal like media interviews and things, when somebody asks what can a person do, I basically have a three-part recipe. One is get in your kitchen, and that includes buying bulk items seasonally, like take tomatoes. I love tomatoes. Everybody here who loves tomatoes? Yeah, okay. And do you know that 1 week before frost, all the tomatoes get together and have a conference and say it's 1 week away from frost. We're our life is short here, and we're all gonna ripen this week. 1 week before frost. And so what happens is here toward the end of the season, 1 week before frost, farmers markets, everybody's got bucket loads of these tomatoes that are coming in, ripening. Well, by that time we're kind of tired of tomatoes and we're into, sweet potatoes and root crops and maybe some butternut squash and things like that. And so, I mean, there are millions of tons of tomatoes in home gardens, farmers markets that get thrown away at the end of the season. That's what you need to buy. Go to and say, do you have a couple of bushels, all right? And then you can them.
Yeah,
right?
can.
I can't.
I can.
You can.
Do we still know this little mantra?
You can. And suddenly, you've been able to extend that nutrition on into winter. So get in your kitchen. Number 2 is grow something yourself, even if it's a jar of mung beans just to touch life, just to realize the sanctity, the fragility, the awesomeness, the marvels of life. And then the third thing is to take your carve out your entertainment budget for a couple of months and use that time and money investment to vet your local supply chain.
We should get rid of cell phones and entertainment.
Well, you can at least take a moratorium from Netflix and eating out. And if you take a little bit of that, look, right now the average American male between 25 and 35 years old, the average American male between 25 and 35 years old spends 20 hours a week playing video games.
What a waste of time.
Average, yeah. I mean, imagine if those 20 hours were invested in gardening, finding your food, helping a farmer build post holes and get a free quarter of beef in exchange. And you go home and can it, right? And then you got a larder full. Even if
Joel, the ROI on video games is excellent, isn't it?
if you own them.
Kidding. Yeah, if you
own the copyright.
You've written them, huh?
If you've written the platform, yeah. So those are the three. Get in your kitchen, do something yourself, and invest some time in your own problems.
You mentioned something here, and since everybody out here is probably interested in eating, Marcus, if you could just share what you decided to do as a couple cows and how that happened real quickly. I think it's illustrative of what this community can get done that may be more difficult in other areas.
So I have a brother-in-law that raises cows. I have a couple cows myself, but I wasn't willing to part with those for you all. Sorry. I'm still building my herd. So he has a larger herd. And I think, 4 weeks ago, I asked him for 2 cows, and we took it to the butcher, and that's what we're going to have for lunch tomorrow. Today we have chicken, but if I have my menu right. Today we have chicken, and tomorrow we'll have some
audience an idea of the scale. You know, I've known Mark for a long time. In fact, we've had 18 consecutive ski trips to Breckenridge. So just, I said, this is how bad of a salesman I am. It took 17 trips before I sold him anything. So now I can deduct all of those trips.
Yeah, they're business trips.
They're business trips.
Definitely.
Took 18 times. My accountant won't buy it. But if you could just share a little bit about what Walnut Creek does in terms of distribution and the scale and the bulk items that you provide to the stores.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we definitely see ourselves as the key distributor of food products to rural communities. I mean, that's what we kind of view ourselves as. We strategically don't go into urban areas. We don't sell to large chains, but we get, you know, in the last month, I probably had 3 calls from Meyer wanting to buy products from us, and we actually strategically don't sell to larger chains for a lot of reasons, but mainly because we want to stay true to kind of who we are and who we serve. And so it's probably a little dramatic to say this, but we do view ourselves as helping to preserve a way of life for a lot of people in terms of living in rural areas where they can still access quality foods at prices that are reasonable and have a truck show up in their community and provide food products. So that's kind of who we are, and it does tend to be in areas where there's Amish or Mennonite communities. That's not always the case, but that generally is a pretty good criteria as well.
And it all started as a pickup truck and a refrigerator
Yes,
many
yes,
years ago.
yeah.
So, okay, I wanted to, I wrote down a couple of things. By the way, cat being a dog, man a woman, the world really has gone crazy. I never thought that I would be talking about that type of thing. But can you restate the inversion of the 18% and the 9% for both food and healthcare? As an employer, I spend a lot of money every year to insure my employees. So can you maybe revisit that point?
Yeah, so the 40 years ago, the per capita expenditure, the percentage of so take the average income that a person gets, 18% was spent on food and 9% on healthcare. Today, that's inverted to 9% on food, 18% on healthcare. And so in 40 years, we have inverted those two figures. And what I believe is that if we went back to the 18% on food, maybe we could drop our 9%. I mean, anybody who's employing somebody, you know, should be. I don't know what you can do to force your employees, but you know, they shouldn't be drinking Coke.
Well, actually, we have a wellness program at
Yeah.
Superb where we pay people to not drink Coke. We pay
That's
them.
cool.
We have a wellness program to try to do that.
Yeah.
Part of that is self-serving, but
Sure.
you get to the point where, as an employer, you simply cannot afford the insurance premiums. So,
You got to keep people. You got to try to keep people well, you know. And food's not everything. Stress. Maybe if you hire an in-house shrink to deal with relationship stresses.
reduce the size, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, or something like that.
No, I'm like, you know.
I know. Okay, gentlemen, what I'd like to do is we'll start with Matt. You just go around and whatever you would like to share as a tip on what somebody can practically do today, tomorrow, the next day, next week to become more food independent.
Sounds good. It's kind of like a debate where you have the closing comments at the end.
Yes.
So it's kind of okay.
Except we're not in disagreement.
Yeah, we're not a yeah. Yep.
You want me
I
to
think-
make it a little bit more controversial here?
No, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. No, I guess what I'll say is I just think solving the problems in front of us, it's not an individual thing. It's going to be an us thing. We can't solve these problems ourselves. And so I think having discussions like this and getting groups of people together like this is how we're going to move things the right direction. It's not going to be necessarily just trying to do our own thing. And so I think that's what we believe. We come in, and also just I think that's the important piece of it. It's a we thing, not a me thing.
I think that's really important because, and I think our current social media has made it easier for people to go out there and shout at each other, and in some cases call people names. When I know in my lifetime, when you go and actually meet somebody, they're really not as bad as you thought they were, you know? And believe me, I've interacted with some tough characters in the automotive industry, so thank you, Matt.
And what I'll add to that is just, I think a lot of people in this room have influence. You are on social media, you have followings, there's friends that you have, and I think what we saw during the pandemic was there is a lot of interest in homesteading type activities and canning, and a lot of people just don't know about it, and there's no awareness. And so if you have any kind of an influence, do what you can to spread that and help guide people towards this kind of a lifestyle, because I think it is important for all of us.
One of the things thanks Matt, I agree with it being an us thing, not a we thing, not an I thing. One of the things I think has been neglected is the quality of our soil, which of course I touched on a little bit in when I spoke today, but our focus at Berlin Seeds is to support the home gardener and to support the health of the garden soil. So in the next few years, one of the main things we're looking to wrap our arms around is helping home gardeners produce good harvests by taking care of their soil. The products that are available to us commercially are economical and available largely because they're used at large scales, and those are the products that filter down the chain and are most economical for us. But that doesn't say that those products are good for us or are good for our soil. Soil, for me, soil is a little bit like our human bodies, where one person reacts negatively from something and another person reacts negatively to or positively to something different. And soil can be a little tricky to get your arms around, but I think it's possible, and I think with the help of all of you, with the help of people like Joel who've been working, who've had their hands in the dirt for a long time, we'll make a difference.
Joel? I was going to say your closing statement, but you've got a closing statement tomorrow, so what would you say?
So I would say one of the most significant elements of, when we talk about a resilient food system, we have to realize that in nature, the food system fluctuates through the season. You know, you have the strawberries, and then you have chickens lay enough eggs to have enough left over for pickling or making little chicks or whatever. And there's this cycle, all right? And so I would say my number one tip would be to buy a pressure cooker so you can can.
All Americans gonna like that.
And a freezer. Okay, so you get a freezer, you get a pressure canner. That way, when there is overabundance in the local food chain coming in, or you know about it, you can jump on it. If you hit a deer on the road, you can take it home and cut it up and put it in the freezer. But if you don't have a freezer, you can't handle the deer that you hit on the road. You know, and so I can't tell you how many times we've been, well, I can't do that because I don't have enough freezer capacity, or I don't know how to can, or whatever. Well, get the infrastructure, then that excuse is gone. Then all you need is a little bit of knowledge and you're up and running.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even have but a couple of days of food in their home. I've been shocked by some of the conversations I've had.
Yeah, the urban sector has 3 days of food on hand for a city. 3 days of food on hand for a city.
I'd like to interrupt because my son is going to fire me if I don't put in a plug for freeze dryers. These guys are talking about freezers and canning, and that's great, but freeze dryers, you have to check it out at the Berlin Seeds booth.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there's one down here that looks like you can buy tickets and maybe get a free one, because I just bought one. I mean, they're not cheap, but they do work.
Yeah, they do.
Freeze drying retains a lot of nutrition, and the taste is good, and you can, like, freeze dried sweet corn is a great replacement for candy. So sweet and just pops and melts in your mouth. So check out freeze drying for long-term food storage.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your participation. Let's give them a round of applause. So I'm going to hand the microphone to Marcus, and he's going to give you a little bit more details on the food and the rest of the day.
So thank you for coming. The food is going to be served at the far end of the tent, and then you go through the food lines. We have 4 food lines, so the food will be served fairly quickly. I didn't check with the cook to make sure everything is clear, but I'll check with them and make sure that they're ready. If you look in your summit guide, we're using the honor system for the meal today. We planned the event pretty quickly, and so not every I is dotted or every T crossed, and not every comma is at the right place. But we wanted to serve you a good meal, and we wanted to be in charge of the meal and not have food trucks in charge, so that we could serve you quickly and get you down to the exhibitor tent as soon as we can. You can pay $15 in a kind of an offering box in cash, or you can write out a check. If you want to pay with a credit card, you can scan the QR code that's in the Summit Guide on page 2. I didn't check to make sure that the QR code works, but did you check it out? It does work? Thank you. So have a good time. I think they've got good food prepared for us. After you get food, exit down the near doorway and then settle back in here to eat. And Marlon from Plain Values and a few of his friends are going to have a roundtable discussion while you eat here. So we'll entertain you while you're eating, and have a good afternoon. Thanks again.